both sides are digging in their heels. Who has more leverage right now, the Speaker or the President?
Well, there's not a lot of leverage to go around right now, but I think you have to give the edge to the Speaker and the House Republicans, only for the fact that they have already passed a bill out of the House of Representatives that raises the debt limit, except it has serious spending restraints involved in it, which the Democrats and the president have said are sort of non-starters right now. They want a clean debt ceiling. But I think that's one of the reasons why Washington and all of the folks that are observing this process right now, Marni, are very bearish on the prospects of getting something done very soon. I think there's a very high expectation that this could go down to the last minute because the president right now has a very dreamlike version of what his leverage is. He thinks that standing strong against Republicans and insisting that any debt ceiling be a clean debt ceiling raise, it's just not in the cards right now. And so as a result, we are stuck in this standoff.
So who blinks first?
Well, the big problem right now is that there's really, like you mentioned earlier in the introduction, is like we don't have time for much blinking, or we don't have much time for stare downs right now. I think what's most important over the next 48 hours is that all of the leaders get into a room and really start trying to hammer out the details. If there's one lesson that I've always applied to my life in politics and my life here in Washington, it's expedite the inevitable. And the inevitable here is that a bill is going to have to pass with some level or some concessions around spending levels or spending cuts. And so the White House has to recognize that right away and try to make whatever negotiations as painless as possible so that they can ultimately get a deal, avoid the calamitous impact that a default would have, and declare victory and get on with the rest of their agenda.
And there has to be a compromise on both sides, right? Any negotiation, if successful, everybody gives a little. So of the cuts that Republicans are proposing right now, which do you think they're most willing to bend on and approach at a later date?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like you said, I think there's about $4 trillion in spending restraints or cuts in what the House Republicans passed. I expect that if the White House were to try to find some area of agreement on spending, it would be any rescissions or clawbacks related to unspent COVID relief funds. If that was a starting point and they tried to move, as robustly around that agreement, I think that's probably the one domino that'll start to fall as we start to see some greater levels of consensus and agreement on an ultimate deal.
Is there any question that if the nation were to default on its debts, this would hurt President Biden politically more than anyone else?
The only reason I say that I agree with that statement is that ultimately Washington as an institution will be judged very harshly if we're to default. And the president just happens to be the titular head of the institution of Washington. So he has much more at stake. He also has a concentrated level of attention being paid to him on this, whereas House Republicans and other congressional allies, they have a little bit more of a diluted effect on their reelection prospects. The president's heading into a reelection in 2024 with historically low approval ratings, a default on the debt and the calamitous effects that it would ultimately have on the markets. I think it would really, really hurt his prospects.
Kevin, the debt ceiling, I think it's important to remind people, has been raised multiple times under multiple administrations. Often there are spending cuts tied to it. What's different about this one?
I don't know, other than the fact that right now what we're dealing with is a general a general public that has been very weary of spending levels. And if you talk to most economists, everybody is worried that we could potentially teetering on the edge of a recession. So I think the particular issue of spending restraint and spending cuts has more saliency right now with the public. When you're trying to marshal public support for your negotiating position, having that background where there's worries about spending levels at the federal by the federal government, I think it plays a particularly big role in these negotiations.
And thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider, and don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.